So I'm going to talk about how to use inspiration for art when designing Larp and for the kind of experiences that you can design for. Cool. Art can be a lot of different things, and there is a lot of different definitions. One definition that I really like is that art is what happens when the audience encounters the artwork. So it's not just the Mona Lisa as a painting, that's an artwork, it's what happens in the audience when they look at it. You can use the same line of thought for Larp. That Larp is what happens when the players encounters the Larp, when they experience and interact and interpret the Larp design. A way to approach Larp design, one way amongst many, is to see Larp design as creating a frame for the players to have an experience within. You create this frame by choosing how different elements should function. And the elements that you don't decide upon, the players will make up for themselves how these things should be. In any Larp, there's going to be some kind of fiction because players are removed from their everyday situation. There's going to be a narrative because Larp takes place over time, so there's going to be actions one after the other, and as humans we interpret these in narrative terms. There will always be actions and interactions between players and Larp, and there will always be sensory impressions influencing the player experience. Because again, we're humans and we sense all the time. As a Larp designer, you don't have to design for all these different elements. You can choose to design some, and then the players will make up their mind about the rest. So, for example, a way to design when I was starting to roleplay many years ago was to focus on the fiction. You would create very thorough characters and a world that was very specific. For example, a fantasy Larp out in the forest. But then the players are free to act or interact in any ways they want based on the characters. And they might interpret the forest in their own ways, saying that this is the light part of the forest because these are where the elves live. And these are the dark dungeons because this is where the orcs live. And these are the players deciding these things if the designers haven't told them how this works. And if something unexpected happens, like a plane going over the forest, if the designers haven't chosen how the players should react, the players will find this out for themselves, either ignoring it or using it as part of a fiction, saying, oh, it's a dragon, or saying that this is weird, and then go on playing, or whatever they like. So going in through fiction and letting the players decide the rest is one way to go. You can also go in through, for example, actions. If you'd all try to do like this, taking your hands in front of your faces, yeah, and then peek out like this. This is a quite simple action, but I think most of us already here could try to interpret some kind of character or get some kind of inner image about a situation that this simple actions is creating. So going from this, having something to do, can create images in us. And then the players will interpret the fiction and the characters out from the images, like the actions that they're supposed to do. Yes. I'll try to come with an example for this, also to connect it a bit to theme and representation of theme. If you're going to design a Larp about fear, this is your theme. You can do it by designing the fiction and the narrative in a specific way. For example, having a dark fantasy fiction, creating a character which is a young child, a long background story for this young child, where it's being chased by monsters all its life and never sees the monsters. Then you create a narrative, which is a lot of scenes where the monsters get closer and finally attacks the child. That's one way to go. You create the narrative and you create the fiction. You can also go the other way around, creating the actions and the sensory impressions. For example, you can create a situation saying that there's something underneath you, and players can only move really, really slowly And they all have to like breathe very heavily. And when they encounter other players, they can touch them, but they can't talk. And they will always find out sooner or later that the other player is the enemy. And then you can put on scary music and green lights, and by that creating a sensation of fear in the players, but not going through a specific situation, but through the impressions that the players get and the way that the players get to act. Yes. Designing through actions and through sensory experiences is something that I have worked with a lot because it is really good for designing a specific kind of experiences. It's good for creating intuitive meaningfulness. Like if you have the scary music and you have the slow movements, then it's going to create something within you. And also designing through actions and sensory experiences is really good for creating a space for the players to interpret the situations by themselves. These things, for me, is quite inspired by art. You know, I think most of us has music or images which feels meaningful in some way. Like some music you listen to which just like hits you some way. It's beautiful, or it's sad, but you can't really explain why. Or images, paintings that feels scary or feels strong, but not because of the thing that it portrays, but because of the way it portrays it. Yes, this is a painting by Marcel Duchamp. It's quite like non-figurative. And if you look at it, I think it will be possible to find something that is meaningful to you, or at least like looking into what this combination of colors and shapes and lines, like what it does to you. And this is one way of looking at it, just like taking in the impressions and what it does to you. Another way to approach this image is to see like if you can find some kind of image in it, like some figures or a story maybe hidden somewhere inside this. The image has a name. It's called Nude Descending a Staircase, like a nude person maybe going down a staircase. And knowing that this is the title that the painter has given the painting, for me at least changes something about the way I look at it. Maybe trying to find the nude person in the picture, or trying to find out like what is the feeling connected to being nude on a staircase that is portrayed here. If I was to put on some music, maybe going dot 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 dum, then that would influence the way that you see the nude shape on the staircase as well. And if the music was like dum da 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 dum da 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 dum, there would be a completely other kind of nude person situation on staircase. Yeah. So when you design this way, like it's not only each element, it's also the way that different elements come together and create meaningfulness. And by adding the different elements, you can like narrow down the interpretation or the feeling of the situation for the players. Yes. Designing for sensory impressions, like music or texture of things or the way people move, is really good to create this kind of intuitive meaningfulness, because we are intuitively really influenced by the way that we sense the world. It functions on another level than verbal communication and logic thought. It hits us often without us being aware of exactly how or why. And for the same reason, like when you design for sensory impressions, it can be good to not explain too much, because that's not what this kind of experience is about, understanding. It's about just taking it in, both like in the lab itself and afterwards dealing with it and in the workshop. An example for designing this way could be like if you go back to the scary situation, you move really slowly, you have the music, and then maybe the music, you start as a designer to make music that's more upbeat. And this is really uncomfortable for players because they're moving really slowly, and having the music being really fast will create this kind of tension. Then you can let like the music stop and maybe change the lights from horrible green until beautiful blue and red colors, and all of a sudden, the slow movements will be more like dreamlike than scary. Then you can start the music up again, being like scary, but slow scary, and you can like get it back again. But in this way, influencing the players through the sensory experiences without them knowing exactly what the music or the movements mean. Yes. Designing through actions is a very good way of designing the space for the players to interpret their own meaningfulness within the LARPing experience. Especially if you cut out the language, because that's normally how we negotiate situations. We talk about what is this, what is that. If you cut the language away or restrict the way that people are allowed to talk, it opens the possibilities for having a lot of diverse interpretation of what a situation is like. And designing for concrete actions also can be really, it's really safe for players to know exactly what to do in a LARP. If you know that you're only supposed to move like this and in straight lines, it is really easy to interact with the LARP then. And then you can focus on other experiences, interpreting why you're moving like that in this LARP, for example. A really good example for this way to design is Gabriel Widing's The Infinite LARP scenario, I think it's called. Some of you played it last year at the summer school. You have a deck of 9 cards. Each card has an instruction for something to say or something to do. You go through the cards one by one, doing the stuff it says. You can direct your actions anywhere in the room that you like. And you decide when you do the action and do it in your own pace. That's it. There's no more design than that. But when you start doing it, a group of people, it becomes this, it becomes really meaningful, because all the nuances in the way that you do this, who you direct it to, or like if 2 people do it at the same time, you interpret this into meaningful situations, because the frame is very narrow. You have a lot of room in your head to make it meaningful for yourself. Yes, to sum up this way of design, you can think about it as, on one hand, having enough designed elements, like there could be fiction, or actions, or sensory impressions, or narrative, or any combination of these, or completely other elements, but enough things that you had decided should be in a certain way for the players to have inspiration for the actions that they're going to do or the way that they're going to interpret, and to have safety that they know how they're supposed to react when they're in the LARP. And at the same time, leaving enough blanks, enough open space for the players to have something to do, like either the freedom to act like they would like, or the freedom to interpret the situations. It could be even like just feeling into the nuances of a sequence of actions, but something that is theirs, that they make meaningful for themselves. Yes, I've been very inspired by art in my designs. There's loads of things to be inspired by. And this is LARP is our thing, our media, and we're allowed to do whatever we want with it, and allowed to experiment, and allowed to create any kind of experience that we'd like. Thank you.